Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves.
Welcome to the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast. My name's Steve Barlow, and this is our first episode for 2023, so it's good to be back with everybody. And as always, I'm joined by Craig. How are you today, Craig?
Good, thanks, Steve. I'm very refreshed after the break. It was nice to just have some downtime. I think over Christmas and New Year. What about yourself? Did you get some time to refresh?
Yeah. I had some time to relax and some time to help my son with his building, which is a challenge in its own right. But look, today we're joined by Wendy Quinn, who's zooming in from Hobart. And Wendy is a lady that I've known for 10 years or so. And we've worked together at the University of Tasmania in the Master of Leadership program. So it's great to have you with us, Wendy. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background as to who you are and kind of where you've come from?
Okay, I can attempt to do that. So good morning, Steve, and good morning, Craig, and thank you for this very interesting opportunity. So who am I in a nutshell? So from a working perspective, I began my career in Sydney and set out armed with a vocational guidance booklet and zeroed in on the profession of occupational therapy. And so I studied occupational therapy, not having ever met one, and which was probably not the best basis for deciding one's career. But it ended up being the most amazing course that covers a little bit of everything and a whole lot of nothing. And so it provided me with a really good background to basically have a launching pad to do a whole range of other things in my life and career. So I found my way to Tasmania. I spent really probably about the first 15 years of my working life working as an occupational therapist, largely with children with developmental disabilities and with all sorts of teams. So lots of teams of people. So a lot of that is very transferable into any other setting that I've ever worked in. And then I began my career, which was really a leadership management career. And I say it was like putting on a stack hat and, getting into a raging river and, riding the rapids. So it just kept kind of unfolding and happening. And so there were all of those R words like restructure and reinvention and reorganizing and resizing. And my job, kept changing, and I kept being assigned to new areas of work. And so I learned a whole lot of, I guess, again, sort of transferable skills in rapidly learning how to work with different, directors and managers, and also how to begin again, with groups of people to create things, sometimes out of an existing mess and often out of nothing, and to kind of move in and learn to speak a different language with different groups of people, that kind of thing. So then at the end of what became a 28-year career in the Department of Health and Human Services, it kept changing its name all the time too. But it was generally speaking, the collection of everything about health and human services, all the other things that tag along with it, like aged care and juvenile justice and correctional health services and all sorts of things like that. I found my way into what I like to call my encore career. And that's the work of Mark Friedman from the US. And this is the time in my life when I'm not so focused on having to necessarily work ridiculously hard. And there's an emphasis on zeroing in on what it is that I really like to do and love to do, and that it's got a strong element of giving back and supporting the next generation. And also that leaves me with some time to do other things in my life, like play with little grandchildren and sing in choirs and that sort of thing. And as part of that package, I was gifted, really, a part-time job at the University of Tasmania in the beginning, to teach leading and managing change to leaders and managers within who are working in sort of health and human services. And that's grown into a little bit more of an academic career. And so I look after a master's course, but the focus is still on leadership.
Well, it's certainly a rich treasure trove there, and an amazing resume and experience. Wendy, I'd like to ask you, just take you back a bit, is what you said about the occupational therapy and the fact that you sound like you were an accidental occupational therapist, from what you said, but you stayed in it for 15 years. I know a young professional who's just gone into this, and especially working with kids like you said you were. Can you tell us about the occupational therapy piece? I know it takes you back a bit, but about how you got into that and what it meant to you, because it obviously has done a lot of formative things in your career for you.
Yep.
15 years is not a short period.
No, that's right. Yep. So it's not a career that I easily discarded either. Yep. So what drew me into it was that I think I've always been a bit of a generalist. You know, there are lots of things that I like and that I like doing, and that I've had various bits of feedback over the years that I'm good at. You know, so rather than being one of those people that has a very clear area of excellence, I've got a whole range of things where I'm good, you know, but maybe not, you know, the best. Right. So that's both a good thing, but also a confusing thing when you're, you know, making your way through school and trying to work out what it is that you could do. So I had a bunch of things that I knew that I really liked and that I was good at. And they included things like science and genetics and health. And so I've always been really attracted to, really, I guess, the human body and human beings and their body and their mind and really their spirit as well. So it's like how they work and what happens when things go wrong. I was always naturally interested in that. So there's that kind of side of things. Then I was also interested in art and music, and I was good at them as well.
We interview a lot of professionals who are, some of them actually either lawyers or people in the health industry or something, and that art piece comes up quite regularly. Actually, it's quite interesting about injecting the creativity piece into one's profession. I'm interested in what you said in amongst this. You said you knew a lot about everything and nothing. Nothing. That was your words, right? What does that mean?
A whole lot about nothing. So I know a little bit. So and that's really what, when I read the little description about occupational therapy, it said, you know, something along the lines of you could learn to use a range of things to assist other people in their rehabilitation. And the course was like that as well. It was this wondrous treasure trove of, you know, I got to do a little bit of anatomy and physiology and philosophy and sociology and, all those very kind of mind learning things. But I also got to do pipe bending and wood turning and silk screens printing and pottery and leather work and weaving, and you get the idea.
Sure. That is fantastic.
So what that means, and it was meant to give a foundation for people to go in and design rehab programs for people, zeroing in on what activities might be motivating for them that might enable them to either improve their function or find meaning and purpose in what they were doing. Not actually to become a carpenter or a pipe bender or an engineer or an artist, but to know enough about it to use it. And really, that's what happened in the OT training. So I got to learn a little bit about all of these things.
I see.
But I couldn't actually apply to be, I couldn't build a career being a carpenter.
Or a pipe bender.
Or a pipe bender. Or a wood turner. But I know enough about them to be able to converse with people who are working in those areas and to also be able to understand where they might have a problem and what kind of skills they might need.
So I just want to thank you, and I just want to move a little bit along. And you you described it as the phase for your leadership management career, and you used the word riding the rapids and the R words. So
yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Okay, so for me it was a quite a contrast. When that I began to experience moving out of being a therapist and running an OT department, because in that world and in my experience in that world, things happen, and patients or clients come and go and you design programs for them, but largely speaking, the nature of what you're doing stays reasonably stable. And that you're an occupational therapist, and you might become a senior one or you might become in charge of the department, but the scope of change is relatively limited. But as soon as I began to dip my toes in the waters of giving up, being an occupational therapist and starting to put on the mantle of being, a manager. I think my first job was manager of assessment and rehabilitation in southern Tasmania. And then sitting underneath that was a whole range of things like aged care assessment teams and day therapy centres and, artificial limbs. So all these areas that I didn't know a lot about that were all very important. And so what I started to experience then was that my job was about making sense of what is occurring now and what is needed into the future, and beginning to engage with, people, but also the system to rearrange it, to make it, to do something with it, to kind of make the whole thing work better. So that's what kind of led to all of those R words.
Yes.
And also led to an ongoing experience of, well, we're doing this today. We've got this structure and this is your job title, but, next month, you're needed to do something quite different in a different area, and the job title is this one. To give you a little bit of a flavour of that, I think I hold the Department of Health's record for having had the shortest job. And my job lasted from the beginning of the day until morning tea.
What was the situation there? Sounds like is that one of the roller coaster things, is it?
Yes.
The ride in the rapids.
And what made it even worse was that the circumstances were that I was in a job which was a temporary job. This was in the middle of a very large restructure. where 180 middle management positions got spilled and got all rearranged, and everyone, got told what they were doing next at the end of that. And so then there was an implementation period to go from one structure to the next one. And as part of that, I was assigned to do a certain role, and I was acting in it, and I acted in it for 6 months. And then I had a phone call to say, we need you to go and do another job. And so I started in that job. I had a farewell from the group of people that I've been working with in some way or other for about, I think it was about 3.5 years. So there was a farewell and a gift and a cake and all of that, bye. And changing of cars and phones and all of that, everything.
All important things.
Oh, yeah. And then I started in the new job, which was a mental health services job rather than aged care. So quite different area with quite different language and ideology. Came in, and there was another cake, welcome. And met all the people and did a little bit of work. And then I took a phone call halfway through the morning that said, look, we're very sorry, Wendy, but we need you to go back to where you were and act in a different job.
And your car back and your phone.
And we need you to do it immediately.
So
you get the idea?
Yeah, I get the idea. I think it does sound like riding the rapids. Can I ask you? You're just quickly. You're on about aged care and correctional services. I heard you mention as well.
Yes.
And a few other areas. It's a quite for health and human services is quite a broad umbrella these days, isn't it?
Yes.
Luckily, human is in the title, so that encourages us, doesn't it? But how do you cover such a wide gamut of end user or clients in that space, because there's a lot of differences required, aren't there?
Yes and no. I think that's where my occupational therapy training was enormously helpful, because it was about learning that you don't actually have to know everything about something to be able to move into an area, to be able to begin to make sense of what's happening and what's needed. So that was helpful. I think the other issue is that wherever you go, to a certain extent, it's the same plot, different characters. There's an element of that occurring.
Okay.
I once had an experience after one of these episodes of, waking up and discovering that I had a new job in a completely different area. And this was again, a large number of jobs was spilled. I had a Friday afternoon interview for 4 jobs at the same time, and the interview lasted 10 minutes. And I started to speak, and the poor panel that had been interviewing all week, would stop me after about half a dozen words and say, that's enough. And they the interview lasted 10 minutes, and then they said, thank you, that's good. We'll let you know. And at the end of that process, I was informed the following week that my new job, and I'd only ever been an occupational therapist or an operational manager of sets of services that revolved around that rehab area. And I discovered that my new job was managing a policy and planning unit that had a seat at the table for a whole lot of national things like aged care, disability, etc. And I thought,
these are the transferable skills things that you
Yeah.
talked about earlier. Can you talk, just moving on to, you mentioned your on-call career was with, and you're engaging with Friedman from the US. Can you talk about that just for a minute?
My on-call career.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, is it Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
Can you talk about that, what that means?
Okay. So what happened was, after riding the rapids for 28 years, I decided that it was time to leave.
Mm.
And the other metaphor that I use then is, and it kind of goes with riding the rapids, is that I describe needing to sit on a rock for a while and reflect upon what was all of that.
Mm.
And where was I, and what did I need to do next? And so I had a period of time, and it lasted probably for a good 6 months, where I was very intentionally not moving into the next stage or taking a whole lot of things on, and just contemplating and reflecting on what is it that I should be doing with my life and work now. I was aged 57, which is kind of an interesting age for, I could notionally retire, but I knew that I really was not quite finished with working. And yet I didn't really want to work in the way that I had been working. So as part of
inspection and so on, was it?
Yeah. So as part of sitting on my rock, I read a number of books, and I was alert to listening for kind of guidance in that time. And along came an interview on Radio National. I think it was a Geraldine Duke interview with Mark Friedman.
Okay.
And so I got to listen to him talking about this idea of an encore career.
How interesting.
And so I was so it really kind of connected and resonated with me. So I had a little sort of play on Amazon later, and ordered, I think, 3 of his books. Okay. And they arrived relatively quickly. So I moved into them, read them. Okay. And at the same time, I was also reading work from a couple of other authors. And so I ended up with liking the title Encore.
Yeah.
And then building my own version of really what Mark Friedman was talking about.
Fantastic. I just want to, like, you're such a great, you seem to me like a great learner and someone who's reinvented themselves 3 or 4 times through their career. Have you got any, just to finish up my last question, Steve, is what is the advice you would give to someone setting out on their career? Not necessarily, but occupational therapy is a career that seems to have served you quite well as a foundation. What is the advice you would give to a young graduate that's coming out now?
I think probably the best advice would be not to think about whatever job you start out with as being the career that you are having, because all of the lived experience and the statistics would strongly indicate that most of us are likely to have a number of quite different jobs and kind of career lines in our working life. And so not to start out with the understanding that this is it. And if you kind of approach your career from that perspective, it begins to change a number of things, including the fact that, what is it that you are learning from this stage, and how might you be able to utilize that elsewhere?
Yeah, that's that transferable skills theme that you've woven through what you've been talking about today.
Yeah. The other kind of advice, and this is kind of strongly linked to where I'm at now with an encore career, but I wish I'd known about it much earlier. And it's a little mini quote from he's actually a German theologian, Friedrich Buchner, I think his name is. And it was just at the beginning of one of the chapters in one of these books that I was reading about, shaping the next stage of your life. And it goes, vocation is where your deep gladness meets the world's great hunger.
That's a beautiful way to finish. Thank you. Steve, you want to sum this up? It's a wonderful.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Wendy. As always, you're very inspirational. And you've given us some really good points here, and I want to just focus on a few of them, perhaps 4 of them. But you've also sort of fleshed it out with a lot of stories about your own life and your experience. So that's sort of made it real. The 4 areas that I got out of your talk and that I want to focus on is, first of all, about others.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, about the environment. Thirdly, about you as a person, or maybe all of us as people. And then finally about learning. So in terms of others, you talked about when you started, you were interested, you said, in people and how people work and what happens when things go wrong. And I think that there's a lesson here for all of us to be interested in the way people work and how do they experience life. We all experience life in our own unique ways, and we see through our own eyes. But the challenge is to learn how other people see the world and how they work, and what are their problems, and how can we perhaps help them find solutions to their problems. So it's this focus on understanding other people. The second area that you talked about was the environment, and you talked about riding the rapids. And rapidly learning how to ride the environment and how to you talked about the R words, the reshaping, the reinventing, the restructuring, and all of these sorts of words. And this refers to an environment that's changing, and it's changing quickly, and you've got to try and assess which bits of it are where and how is it moving, what are its needs. And so there is a learning here for all of us that we need to not only be aware of people, but also aware of the context and what's going on between people and within the world that we're working in. And then the third area was about you, and you talked about within this learning about other people and how they work and what's going wrong with them, and this environment that's changing, that requires a lot of learning about ourselves and a lot of learning for ourselves. And you talked about, learning to speak a different language, working with different people in different places, in different contexts. And so we do need to work on ourselves, that we have to adapt. We have to change, and we have to become more than what we have been in the past, so that we can kind of figure all this out. And then fourthly, you talked about the whole area of balance. You talked about in your own life, you were interested in science, but then you're interested in art and music, and there is a balance there in your personality or whatever that is. But there's also a balance between what you know and what you don't know, and being realistic about the fact that you do know certain things, but there are other things you don't know. So let's accept that as part of the balance. And you also talked about, in your own experience, you talked about needing to sit on a rock and reflect, to get that balance between doing and then thinking about what you're doing, between the past and the future, and getting the balance right in the present. And that's an important thing. And then summing it all up, you talked about learning. And learning about others, learning about a rapidly changing environment, learning about yourself. And there is, amidst all this difference, some common threads to be observed. And you talked about same plot, different characters, and seeing common threads, seeing what's always the same or what tends to be the same, and recognizing that amidst all the change, not everything changes. There are themes. And sort of going along with those themes and using the power of those themes can be a very powerful thing. So that's my summary anyway of what I heard you say. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, Steve. That was
wow, Wendy.
did I say all of that?
You did. Well, that's what I heard.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom, Wendy. That was fantastic. So a lot of great nuggets in there for younger people, and also people thinking about changing their careers and stuff. So it's exactly on point for our podcast, and I really appreciate you sharing it. So thank you very much.
A pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsaffin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.